Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Europasaal for our second panel here today, looking at overcoming the bottleneck of specialized labor. We had a really interesting panel just before this one. And one of the panelists brought up how important workers are and specialized labor. I'm really happy that we get to talk about this today. This is an issue that we've talked about in past years at the BETD, and it's one of the most critical. So I thank you all so much for joining me and taking time to be here for this panel as we look at methodologies that address how we can overcome shortages in specialized labor as we're designing and building up renewable energy infrastructure. Now, Baerbock noted this in our opening keynote yesterday, and we touched on the topic, as I said earlier today in the Europasaal. It's been a theme in the past few years, and we're going to look at how, this year we're especially going to look at how we can focus on building up a labor sector without pinching or poaching from other countries. Joining me today on this panel are Tatiana Iosipa, the Special Representative for Energy and Climate Diplomacy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Romania. All the way at the left, Gilberto Barrios Castillo, the Undersecretary of Energy Transition and Planning at the Ministry of Energy in Mexico. Dr. Barbara Kaufmann, the Director for Employment and Social Governance and Analysis, the European Commission here in Germany. Antje Klaus-Vorreiter, the co-founder and CEO of the Green Solar Academy, Party Limited, Germany, and Eric Manzi, the Deputy General Secretary at the International Trade Union Confederation in Rwanda. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I want to start off now with our first round of questions, which sort of generally address the theme of, does the bottleneck of specialized labor exist? And I'd like to start off, Dr. Barbara Kaufmann, with you. You're the Director for Employment of Social Governance and Analysis and for the European Commission. Now, European countries have adopted policies to bring down greenhouse gas emissions. The EU has also written into its climate law the goal of climate neutrality by 2030. We heard earlier today, we can all do the math, 7 years from now. And it's also raised its emission target to 55% fewer emissions by 2030 when compared to 1990, the Fit for 55. To reach these goals, renewable energy infrastructure has to be expanded massively. Are the policies being implemented now? Can you already observe a shortage on the market for specialized labor? That is, people who build up, who run, and who maintain these renewable energy infrastructure pieces? How does the availability of specialized labor differ among EU countries? I know that's a lot of questions, so please, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning. Oh, yeah, still good morning. And thanks a lot, Jennifer, for these questions and also for outlining our really ambitious agenda in the EU in terms of green transition. I have to say, for us, it's clear that this green transition also has to be fair. And it's also clear that we need enormous skilled labor. And you're right, we already see some labor shortages. I should also say that the data, especially if you want to ask about renewables, is not so easy to find. So I'm trying my best to tell you what I've found. But before I do that, let's also mention that we have had a trend of labor shortages for 10 years in the EU. And it's basically linked to the fact that we are an aging continent, and it's getting worse and worse. It's also linked to the fact that we're not managing sufficiently, maybe others do worse, but we're not managing sufficiently to include people in the labor market, people like women, people with a migrant background, especially women with a migrant background, people with disabilities. So that's another issue. And thirdly, now, as you say, we have this accelerated green transition, and we are creating a lot more jobs, and therefore we can expect the labor shortages that we see already are even increasing. Now, your question is, what do we see already? So I give you a few numbers. For instance, we can say that 30% of EU employers in industry and also 30% of EU employers in the construction sector say the labor shortages are limiting their business activity. And for industry, I know this is a tripling since 2020. We also know that, according to the European Investment Bank, 80% of people say they have difficulties to recruit people, and the skill shortages prevent their further development, including in key sectors for the green transition. And we also know that, some specific sectors, construction, manufacturing, transportation, water supply, energy sector, the vacancy rate has doubled since 2015 to around 2.5% in the EU. And when we come to the country question, then I can say there are even differences here. And maybe something that's also very important, when you look at public administrations, then 70% say we do not have the necessary skills and resources to carry out environmental impact assessments, and that can be also a factor hampering permitting. So now just to your question on the national level, for instance, the European Labour Authority says 2/3 of member states report shortages for occupation that are relevant for the green transition: bricklayers, roofers, electricians, engineers. So 2/3. If we look at Germany, for instance, where we are, the job vacancy I mentioned earlier has increased from 3% to over 7% compared to the EU average of 2.5%. Or in Poland, it has also doubled, but it's still at 2%. And looking, for instance, at Spain, it's much lower. So yes, there are differences inside the EU. And I should also say, of course, we can go much further. We can also start talking about teachers and trainers, because we will need these people to train the people that then go into the green economy. So I think here we see in Belgium, Sweden, Netherlands, Denmark, they already have these major shortages for vocational education and training. I think I stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much for giving us that introductory overview of the EU. We'll come back to that. I'll get to you in just a moment. But first, I also want to turn now to Gilberto Barrios Castillo, the Undersecretary from Mexico. I wonder if you can give us a sort of a brief state of affairs in Mexico as it is right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your kind invitation. We think the energy transition must be implemented responsibly, in one hand, to the environment, and also to provide a good service to all citizens in the world. At this time, it's not recommended for Mexico to be disconnected from firm generation. Rather, what is applied is alternating intermittent energy with clean firm energy, such hydroelectric, clean as gas that currently represents a vehicle to achieve the energy transition. In Mexico, only 3% of electricity is produced with coal. Our country only has full oil generation plant. When our actual president was elected as governor, clean energy generation was promoted. We started at 22%, and in 4 years of this government, we reached 29.6%. The energy transition is a great commitment that Mexico supports in this way. We have set ourselves the objective of reaching the 35% of clean energy by the year 2024, the year in which the present administration ends. To achieve this objective, our country has energy transition law that obligate us to achieve these important goals. This is legal. We have the National Institute for Electricity and Clean Energies, which is more than 50 years old, where you can also see geothermal energy and hydroelectric plants. And you can see everything, and we also have a National Institute for Nuclear Institute. This is our outlook. Thank you very much for your kind invitation to this important and necessary dialogue.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary for Mexico, Gilberto Barrios Castillo. I know that you're not feeling well. You are, of course, welcome to stay on stage, but if you have to leave, we understand. And thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you. I'd like to go now back to the EU. Tatiana Iosipa, Romania's Special Representative for Energy and Climate Diplomacy. Speaking for Romania, do you agree, I saw you nodding a little bit, with Dr. Barbara Kaufmann's analysis from the side of the EU Commission? And can you observe a shortage of specialized labor in the renewable energy sector in Romania? And the second part of that question is, in what sort of activities or sectors do you see that shortage as being most visible in Romania?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much for convening this panel, Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue. This is a very, very hot topic that we all been dealing with when we talk about energy transition. I totally agree with Dr. Kaufmann's analysis. We do see a shortage of labor in the green transition everywhere in Europe, because phasing out fossils and carrying out huge investments in renewable energy requires not only funds and not only access to green technology, but also specialized labor. In Romania, we estimate that by 2030 we would need between 15 and 20,000 new jobs, both for the construction and the operating of windmills and photovoltaic parks. We already see imbalances in the Romanian labor market, exactly as Dr. Kaufmann has said, because of the pressures of the globalization, the aging population, low birth rates in Romania's case, and also the relocation of Romanian workers within the EU. So unless we properly retain the existing labor by reskilling and upskilling and preparing the new generation of workers, we risk to run into labor shortages and slowing down and maybe losing momentum of our transition. So how do we address labor shortages? With measures on the short term and measures on the medium and long term. On the short term, of course, the temporary solution might be for some sectors the import of labor. And I know you just mentioned in your introduction that might not be a good idea, but to a certain extent we do resort to that, and I know a lot of countries have been resorting to that. But on the medium and long term, however, we should focus on adopting and implementing employee education and skill development programs. And in Romania, the industry is rising to the challenge. We have private companies, and I would mention only one, Monsoon, the largest development of green energy in Romania, that set up in 2015 a renewable energy school of skills. And I think this will tie in very, very nicely with Ance's presentation, because this particular school has training centers throughout the country, both in areas where we do develop green energy, but also in the areas where we decommission some of the coal production facilities. They have 150 courses, both internationally and nationally accredited, and they are part of a network that trains about 90% of all the European labor in green energy. So yes, we do see a demand of specialized labor. We are in a global competition for specialists. We shouldn't kid ourselves. The people that are well prepared and well trained can find employment anywhere in the world. So we have to offer them the best conditions, good salaries, good jobs, and good career prospects.
Thank you very much, Tatjana Iosipera. You mentioned, Antje, Klaus Vorreiter, education being extremely important. So let's talk about that. You are the co-founder and the CEO of the Green Solar Academy, with branches, I think, in 9 countries in Africa. And you have project activities in a few more than just those 9. From your experience, do these countries suffer from a shortage of specialized workers and engineers, so people that build up the renewable energy infrastructure? And the next part of my question is, what are some of the differences you've observed between those countries in which Green Solar Academy is active?
Thanks. I think I will answer the question together, or both questions together. We are working in several countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and I think the best way to answer the question is to look to 3 different countries which are in a different level of development in the just energy transition. So let's start with our home country, South Africa. So we are both the owners, we are Germans, but the company is based in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and we have been working there now for more than 10 years, so we are 100% South African company. And yes, in South Africa, we definitely face a lack or a shortage of skilled labor. For those who are from Germany and who know what is happening in Germany now, or what happened in Germany like 15 years ago, so when the PV market was booming and now it's booming again, this is where we are in South Africa. So the growth is exponential, and nobody would have predicted that. So we started 10 years ago with 2 academies, one in Cape Town, one in Johannesburg. We offered maybe 5 trainings a year. Now we offer minimum 1 training per day. Presently, and this is actually also what is going on in the industry. So we train between 150 to 250 participants per month in 5 academies in South Africa. So there's definitely a shortage of labor. And what changed in the market is, at the beginning when we started, we trained entrepreneurs who saw the opportunity to work in solar, who saw opportunities to add a new business field for their companies. But now we have quite a solid PV market. We have a lot of companies, there are about 700 companies, solateurs, how we call them in Germany, so companies working in the PV industry as installers, and they now lack skilled labor. And this is where we are now. And I mean, we are a company, a PTWare Limited, and we offer professional training short courses, but that was okay for the start. But right now, we need the people who work in the field. And together with our partner Life Choices in Cape Town, we presently develop a training for the youth program to overcome that problem, to really be able to skill the youngsters to work as PV mounters on the construction site. So this is where we are. And please do not go to South Africa and steal our labor. And not to the continent at all. Yeah, Ethiopia, it's the opposite. So in Ethiopia, actually, we have a very well-established training program. We were involved in developing a 3-year training program for TVET colleges. It's good to start early with the training program for the youth, because that's the problem we are facing right now in South Africa. But so having the training program is one thing, but the idea to train thousands of youngsters in PV where there's no market, it's a bit of a problem. So, and this is where we are right now in Ethiopia. We have a solid PV industry there, and it's old and established, like more than almost 20 years, I would say, but it's like in the small scale off-grid market, and they need every year a few new people, but not thousands. And Ghana is kind of in between South Africa and Ethiopia. So it's a little bit where South Africa was 10 years ago. So it starts to professionalize. We have companies, a solid PV industry, and what they lack is young engineers with the skills to plan PV systems. And we started to work there 4 years ago. We have a partner academy in Ghana, and together with our partners in Accra, we helped the Takoradi University, the technical university in Takoradi, to establish a solar training center to train the youngsters, the young engineer the industry needs. So, yeah, that's kind of where we are in the countries where we work.
Thank you so much for that overview, Antje Klaus Vorreiter. We've heard a little bit about the EU, we've heard about Africa, a brief foray, and I want to return now to the Americas and also to Asia. Eric Mansi, the International Trade Union Confederation. It's an international organization that advocates globally for workers' rights. If we're looking at Asia and the Americas now, would you say there's a bottleneck of labor specialized in the renewable energy infrastructure that's in those regions? And if it exists, and I think it probably does the shortage of labor improve the situation of workers in terms of wages and working conditions? And how unionized is the renewable energy sector sort of globally?
Thank you. As you said, I'm representing the ITUC. It's an organization, confederation, international, and we're representing 200 million workers across the world. Yes, of course, the bottleneck exists all over the world, with perhaps more acuteness from one continent to another, or from country to another country, as you said. But what we can say is, if you have some, especially in the USA, or if another path, you go to Australia, we are there already some organization in terms of to address the challenges of the transition, energetic transition. But if you go to the Latin America, there we have many problems. I think even my ex-neighbor said that there is some program, there's some political will, but not yet a strong program. What I can say as a trade unionist is the fact, if we have, if we as we know, we have the strong potential in terms of creation of new jobs or the projecting employment volumes in renewable energy sector. But on the other side, we will see it's not, we are not, you have very few little research, empirical research in terms of the challenge, opportunities, and solution for labor market supply in terms of the just transition. For us, to talk about the labor bottlenecks, or would say the shortage, labor shortage in terms of the new transition, is for us the symptoms of poorly managed transition. We have known for many years that this transition to renewable energy is necessary. The fact that we don't have the skilled workers to make this transition is part of the problematic strategy by many governments. However, we recognize that appropriate labor market, it's the joint responsibility of the employers, the government, and the trade unions. On the side, we insist that the employers of private sector must can simply leave the responsibility for the government, but also they have the responsibility to train their workers in terms of to have some skills, but also to provide to them the decent work condition. It's very important. Both these aspects are essential to address any shortage in labor market. We need to insist on that. Unfortunately, this process is taking place against the background on industrial actions, the strike, the cost living crisis, and the concerns of the workers in terms of their future, in terms of to go to the renewable energy source. And but what I add also is the workers are sensitive on the issue of the decarbonization. Their role in decarbonization is very important to note. But it depends on the continent. It depends on the country, because yes, we have somewhere if they agreed on their role in decarbonization, where they feel that they have enough power bargaining in terms of their condition, in terms of to build their capacity, in terms of their skills. That maybe can go to the question how to unionize that people. To unionize the workers is just to say the skill development plan is essential part of just transition in low carbon economy through renewable energy. In that way, countries need to respect and implement the high local labor rights, and most fundamentally, the freedom of association and the right to collective bargain, and to have a social dialogue and a conducive environment of social dialogue. Because to plan the just transition, the just transition is necessary to sit together as a workers, as employers, as a government, to sit and to discuss on the different plan to develop the skills, but also the working condition.
Thank you so much, Eric Mansi. I love that you're talking about the just transition. We talked about it earlier. We also talked about how important it is to bring along the workers, to make the people who are working in fossil fuels, they also know and they also want to be part of it, but we do have to retrain them and we have to have infrastructure in place. And that's what I want to move on to now in our next round of questions. And I love it because I see you all nodding and taking notes. And if you want to respond to one of your fellow panelists, just let me know. I think it's exciting for everyone if that happens. But I'll come back to you, Antje Klaus-Vorreiter. We're going to look now at strategies to overcome the specialized labor bottleneck and what your co-panelist, Eric Manzi, was talking about, this, like, we need to have structural change. The Green Solar Academy, you provide training for solar installers throughout Africa. And I'm interested in how Green Solar Academy contributes to sort of, I know in some places there isn't a labor shortage, but in places where it is, how do the activities of your academy sort of complement or substitute government policies? Please make sure you take your mic.
Sorry. Maybe I start to explain how we work in Africa. So Green Solar Academy is a private company which operates presently in 12, so we operate presently 12 academies in 7 countries. How do we do it? We work together with partners. So we started 11 years ago in South Africa. And at the beginning, we even offered the training ourselves. We even had trainers from Germany at the beginning. But from the beginning, the idea was to train the people in the country to build up that local capacity. So right now, we do not operate one single academy ourselves. So what we do as a company, so we develop the training program, we train the trainers, we do all the marketing and management. We ensure that the participant get the same training if he goes to Accra, if he goes to Cape Town, if he goes to Johannesburg, but that he also gets the training which is relevant for him. Because, I mean, there's a lot of basics which are, I mean, they are the basics. It's the same all over the world. However, you have to understand the local market, you have to understand the local legislation, and this is where our local trainers are coming in. And this is how we work. And so how we do is we call it a franchise concept. So it's a franchise. It's not, because it's always so difficult to explain what we do. And
franchise,
like friend, yes. It's a corporation, and we are really a big family. Mm-hmm. And so if you see us, if you come to the solar show end of April to South Africa, you will see all the different people with green shirts running around, and those are our partners and trainers from all over the continent. And that's how it works, and this is also what is important for us to create that local value chain. And another thing is that the N in green stands for network. Because the thing is, I mean, we offer short courses, professional short courses. And even so, if you are an electrical engineer or a civil engineer, after a 5-day training, you are not an expert. We can give you the foundation to start in the industry, but without having partners to work with and without knowing where to buy material, you can't start. And this is, we have a very strong alumni network, we have WhatsApp groups, we have frequent meetings where we bring the people together, but we also work together with the industry, we have technology partners, so we are product agnostic in our training, but we invite the manufacturers such as BAE, SMA, and I mean, all the different ones, but also, I mean, not only the German ones, also Victron or Huawei. So we invite them to work with us together, to grow the industry together, and to enable all our academies to work with the latest technology, because that's also important for the participants. So our goal actually is to grow the industry together. A little problem we have is that, and you said it actually, so we have all the women, we have even school dropouts, we have quite a lot of labor potential, or potential labor, which, we can't, I don't know, we can't get them into the courses, even we in the professional courses, so the engineers, the female engineers, they are not coming, and even the women for marketing and so on. And I mean, so it's always the idea to have all the women in PV and especially in engineering. I studied civil engineering. We were 200 students in my year, and we were 20 women. I mean, this is how it is. And so how can we get now? And so Vivian and myself, so my partner, she's also a woman. And so we thought, how do we get the ladies in our courses? And then we came up with nice campaigns, targeted women, and nothing happened. So, and you have to see our alumni, as I said, 95% male. Okay, so then we came up with a campaign which we call the hidden gems. So bring the hidden gems from your companies to the training. And finally it worked. So we started with that 2 years ago in Women Months. So in South Africa, August is Women Months. And so the whole month was about hidden gems and bringing the women to the courses. And finally, they came. Another initiative we had, and that we have that project in Ghana where we set up the Solar Training Center. And the leader or the project manager at the university is also a woman. And we were sitting together and thinking about how do we get the female students to the training, or how can we make solar interesting for them. And they have different faculties, not only engineering, also marketing and finances. And then we thought, I mean, there's so much more in solar than engineering. I myself, I never built a house. I never even managed a construction site. I'm a manager and trainer by heart. So, and this is, I mean, it's a lot of things to do for me in the PV industry. Marketing is a lot of things to do, financing. And so we came up with a workshop which we called Exchange, because we saw two things. So the one thing was getting the women into the PV industry, but the other thing was also to get away from that approach to see Africa as the lost continent. Africa is where we have to come, we Germans, we Europeans, with our solutions. So we think, I mean, there's it's a lot to learn for us in Africa. And I mean, we know it. We are there now for more than 10 years. And even a lot of, even the youngsters there, so to show them that what they have already. And so we created that workshop, and we made it around the International Women's Day. We had 51 young students, female students, discussing about the idea to develop sustainable projects, products, concepts for their municipalities, for their communities. And we brought a group of female professionals from Europe and Africa to exchange with the youngsters.
I think that sharing knowledge is one of the most fundamental issues that the energy transition is going to take. And I want to come back to you about this, and the importance of like educating, and especially educating young girls to work in these fields is important. But I want to make sure we don't also forget about people who have been working traditionally in fossil fuels, because retraining them is going to be absolutely critical. And I want to come back to you now, Eric Mansi. Looking from the Trade Union Confederation perspective, do you think retraining of workers from fossil fuel related sectors and redeployment in the renewable energy sector is feasible, but on a global scale? Like, it's not just going to be in one or two countries, we have to do it on a global scale. How would you judge the overall impacts on employment in countries that are seeking to change their energy mix from fossil fuels to renewables?
Thank you. I think it's feasible strategy. But it's not only feasible, it must to be part of any strategy to achieve the necessary energy transition to renewables. And all figures in all regions indicate that transition to renewable energy will create more jobs, as we said previously. But the crucial aspect is how this will be done, the way will be done, this one. And what is the quality of the jobs we can create after? And the sector to be able to retrain the new sectors, is it possible? That's the question. How can you switch from what you say, the pollute sectors to green energy? That's maybe it's the question. But I think the first thing is, as you said, is to create some to give the confidence to all workers in that sectors. If we start that, the such plan is to create some confidence. Every workers to understand that they can switch to the green economy. Or, as you say, the women to understand that they can have enough skills to be confident about her. But also another the thing is what we said is to need to pay to assessing the supply of skills, and as well as to improving the qualification of the workforce, or the transition will be, or if it don't be done, this transition will be unfair because of the difference from the continent to another. We need to work together. We need some solidarity from some countries where is well developed. If you take some countries in terms of the example we have, where they already put in place some plan, as Germany. The Germany is not because I'm here, but is one of the country where the job is done well, and we can exchange with another country. But we have also some other countries will not be done well, like our neighbor here in Scotland or UK. Even if you say in South Africa, I think in Africa, South Africa is one of the best examples with the best practices. But however, we are not happy because that plan is not implemented with the workers. There is no a good relationship, good involvement of the trade movement in that implementation. It's a problem for us because we need together to work together on in terms of to create, not to reduce the regional disparity of the skills, but also continental disparities. And I think also it's one the point. The second is we need to remove all the barriers to workers wishing to move from fossil fuel sectors to renewable energy sectors. If you take one example, we got to in our organization is the fact. For example, I think it's in Scotland where to move especially for the foreigners. Workers to move from the sectors of to another sectors, we need to have a new work permit. It's not. It's discouraged the people want to move. It's one of the barrier. If you take, I think the example in I think UK where they use sometimes the cheap foreigners workers. To work in the new sector instead of to use maybe the local where they have enough skills or they can develop some skills. What we say we need to have, if you say the just transition must to be just, we must to be fair on implementation.
I think it's hard sometimes to define what's just and what's fair, but I think that talking about making sure that people can pay their rent, that they have enough money to buy groceries. I think this is something that's really important. And I want to come now and look at another specific example since we have you right here from Romania. Tatiana Iosipa, Romania's energy sources, you're relatively balanced right now. I have some numbers, so bear with me for a moment. In terms of electricity generation, 20 to 30% comes from hydropower. So the share of renewable energy, that's actually pretty significant. But a fourth of the national electricity production in Romania comes from coal, and another fifth comes from oil and gas, and most of that is imported. So apart from hydropower, the share of renewable energy that is growing, especially in the wind sector, I think it's around 10% right now in terms of electricity generation. How does the Romanian government approach structural change on the labor market? And are there strategies that you have to redeploy workers from the coal sector into the RE, renewable energies sector?
Yes, and as I said, we are investing massively in renewables because we want to increase our share of renewables from about 24 as it is right now, but overall low carbon energy, including hydro and nuclear, is around 60%. But we still invest in increasing our renewable energy share. And yes, we do have strategies to redeploy people from especially the coal sector towards renewables. We have strategies that deal mostly with the social impact of the coal phase out. We have committed to phase out coal by 2032. And these strategies are crafted by region, by coal mining region and coal electricity producing regions, and they are funded from national or local budgets and also from various European sources as well. We get a lot of support from that as well. In most cases, the strategies provide that the workers are reskilled and upskilled and helping them to get the right qualifications to find new jobs in the green energy production. It's not only the government that is involved, but also the private sector in Romania is also very ambitious in training and retraining projects for people in the coal sector. There are also various support that we receive, and I will just mention here the initiative for coal regions in transition. We believe that the technical and professional skills of technicians in coal are easily transferable to the renewable energy and the energy distribution sectors. The certifications that they obtain from training and retraining courses allow them to work in the installation, operation, and maintenance of the renewable projects and electricity networks. For instance, we can redeploy miners in mining for sustainable mining for raw materials needed from the green transition. And I think this is very important to help us in another strategic direction, preventing replacing the dependency on fossil fuel with a dependency on raw materials from imports. Or they can be reskilled for other jobs. And we have an example in Romania of a company that is successful in recruiting and retraining miners, people that are used with risks and with working in difficult conditions to become maintenance technicians for wind turbines, working in high altitude as opposed to underground. For instance, workers in coal power plants can be retrained to work in power plants using more sustainable energy sources. Because we do have a responsibility to ensure the future for the communities dependent on coal activity that has contributed over the time to the industrialization of the country. Because a successful energy transition includes the modernization of the economy of the regions depending on coal activities and ensuring that those communities have a green future as well. We also, Romania also relies on nuclear energy. We believe that the nuclear energy is necessary in reaching both energy independence, but also the decarbonization targets by 2050. And besides traditional reactors, we're also implementing the small modular reactors, the SMRs, and we have identified a location for them at the site of a decommissioned coal power plant. And we can use the grid infrastructure that exists there, but also the labor by retraining and employing people in a sector that has definitely in Romania has a future. This is a very important human resource that will play an instrumental role in the success of the green transition.
Thank you very much, Tatiana EOC-Pair, for that sort of scaled-in look at Romania. I want to go now to you, Dr. Barbara Kaufmann, to give us a perspective from the EU. After Russia's attack on Ukraine and the ensuing energy shortages here in Europe, the EU Commission drafted the Repower EU strategy. Medium-term measures there focus on expanding renewable energy in EU countries. And as they're working to bridge the current gap in the labor market, how can EU countries work together to prevent international rivalry? This is what we were talking about earlier, not poaching from other countries. How can EU countries work together for the best hands and minds? Yes,
thanks. And just referring to the the plan, the Repower EU plan, let me just say that one of the things is that instead of aiming for 40% of renewables by 2030, we now aim at 45% of renewables by 2030. And also we are aiming at a doubling of the photovoltaic capacity by 2025. So these are some key elements. Indeed, with the idea we need to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. We need to reduce our dependence on Russian energy, especially after this war of aggression against Ukraine. So then, of course, the estimates that we have also now recently a Green Deal industrial plan talking about the manufacturing capacity we need to do all this transition. And the recent estimates we have is that it would create 3.5 million extra jobs by 2030 in the EU, and that we will require investments of 12 billion in retraining. And the question is, how do we do it? I say, as a rule, the EU tends to do things together. We have strategies, the Commission proposes strategies, the EU decides strategies, and then we move in the same direction. And it's definitely true for skills. We have a new or renewed skills agenda from 2020 already. We have, by the way, another framework, which is the European Pillar of Social Rights with 20 principles. How do we move together to achieve upward social convergence? Number one of these principles is skills. We have this year the European Years of Skills. So you see, we are really very much focused that this is the way we now have to go. And now, but going for some concrete actions we do together. We have an EU agency called CEDEFOP. They do skills intelligence. There are other member states do their own skills intelligence, and there are even other agencies working on it. But I think we have to get even much better in that, because everybody's asking how many, what kind of skills, how many people we know, and there's still a lot of work to be done, and we need to work together. Secondly, in terms of the many actions we have, for instance, the Pact for Skills. It's very interesting because here governments, education providers, social partners are working together in key industries, and then there are 14 sectoral pacts where they are saying, okay, how many people do we need by then in this sector? There's one on offshore renewables, there's one on onshore renewables, there's one on batteries, and for instance, for these 14 sectoral pacts, there's already an identification of 6 million people which will be reskilled for specific purposes in these areas. And then some actions, again, they come as proposals, but then in the end they become joint council recommendations to all member states, and everybody tries to do this then. Vocational education and training needs to be modernized, linked better to the labor market needs, green and digital. Curricula need to be updated. Girls need to be brought into STEM more, of course. Universities need to be refocused. And we are now also having sort of a recommendation on micro-credentials, that it's not only about the 3 years, whatever university, but you can do little training here and there, and you can improve your capacities. And also we have, for instance, let's say now the idea to have net zero industry academies to train the trainers. New idea also, but again, EU level. Then there are, as you said, there are national actions undertaken, and there are various EU funds also supporting that. There's, for instance, the European Social Fund. For instance, I also have responsibilities for Greece and Cyprus to implement the European Social Funds. And then we work together, the country programs certain skilling elements, and then they get the funds. There's the Recovery and Resilience Facility, huge funding also, focusing in very large part on greening, but also skilling and employment are huge parts of that fund. Then we have, you already mentioned it, the Just Transition Fund. The whole idea was when we set up the Green Deal, we said, okay, but there are some countries, some regions, coal mining regions, that will be more affected. So what we need is a strategy. And so every region that will be particularly affected had to put forward a plan. And when they implement the plan, they get funding from the EU. So it's a little bit of a redistributive factor to go to put the money in those regions that suffer a lot, so that we all can move together. And basically, another element I wanted to mention is that we have also put forward a recommendation to each member state to come up with a comprehensive package to ensure a fair transition. And that should include employment measures, should include skilling measures, and should include social security measures, and all coordinated with social partners. And I'm saying that also because it's not only about skilling. As I mentioned earlier, it's also about integrating more people in the labor market, otherwise we cannot overcome it. It's also about arrival and integration of talents from outside the EU, and it's also about fair working conditions, because you mentioned that, and I have to say we even put forward recently a directive on minimum wage for the EU, a framework, because it's true, I think from the market point of view, the shortages will push up wages, should also sort of improve working conditions, because there's more demand for people. And now, but basically what I haven't said, because you also asked, we do have the freedom of movement inside the EU, and that obviously means if a worker wishes to work in Germany instead of Romania, they are allowed to move, because that is one of our 4 freedoms and we defend it. At the same time, we also have to say, if you look over time, you can also see that some people go back, because for instance, Polish people used to go all over, and over time, when the country developed, they have moved back. So finally, because I've talked quite a bit, I wanted to say it's not only about what we do in the EU, because we have a whole sort of framework of cooperation with other member states, and it's not only what we do between us, but we also support greening, skilling, for instance, with our partner countries through programs and funding. We have an ETF, a European Training Foundation, that actually supports skilling, skills intelligence, education, labor reforms in non-EU partner countries. We are participating in just transition partnerships, and finally, we're also really participating in international cooperation like the SEM, Clean Energy Ministerial, where we support the skilling and people's element, or in the context of the COP. So we think, in the end, in this skilling business, we all have to move in the same direction. It's no use that we have all the skills and have the green energy, and in the rest of the world there's nothing. So
I think that moving in the same direction is probably the most important takeaway from all of this, is that we have to move in the same direction, we have to do it together. I think that's a fantastic sort of viewpoint from the EU. I'd like to now turn to the rest of the panelists for your closing thoughts, because we've got a few minutes left before our lunch break. Tatiana Iosiper from Romania. You come from a government perspective, obviously, but final thoughts in just a minute or so. What you think that governments and private sector can do to close the gap in the specialized labor market, so that we can finally bring about this renewable energy transition in about a minute, if you can.
I think this is a fantastic opportunity that we have to take advantage of. There are many challenges to the green transition, but there are many opportunities as well. And I think in order to have a successful transition, both governments and the private actors need to invest in the human resource. Romania has made climate education and developing skills for the green transition a priority, a national priority that we have also promoted on a global stage. The COP27, we organized a high-level roundtable. My president, together with the Czech Prime Minister, have chaired it, and we have started a conversation with many other countries on what can we do to support the climate education, and also developing skills for what's coming up in all our countries. And we will continue to promote this topic as well. You mentioned many things we do at the European stage. I was just about to mention the European Year of Skills. This is very important. That will help small and medium-sized enterprises and companies in general get the skills that they need in order to move along with the transition.
Thank you very much for those statements. Antje Klaus-Vorreiter from the Green Solar Academy. Governments and private sectors, what can they do to close the gap in the specialized labor market?
I know that I every time spoke a little bit too long, so I give you the time back. So what we have to do is very simple. We have to work together we have to stop to work in parallel, and we even have to stop to work against each other. That's what we have to do.
I mean, brief, but really to the point. Thank you very much. We'll let the union trade representative have the final word. We're talking about specialized labor. What can governments and the private sector do to work together?
I think we are aligned on what the research is done recently. What is the key? We need the key policy. Is first to see how to smoothing the development of profile, to avoid the boom and bust cycles in terms of to develop the skills. The second is to coordinate approach, as you said, between the government, the industry, and training providers to build training capacity. And the third is the training and employment pathways need to be built for diverse labor market segments. It's not only the focus on some segment, is to develop a broad to use other segments, but also in terms of to develop the workforce, but also to don't forget to include what you say, the disadvantaged group or vulnerable group outside of the workforce. Is important also to, in terms of inclusion, to do that. And the last one is the renewable energy should be managed as part of an ecosystem to develop the workforce that can move between renewable energy and adjacent sectors like manufacturing, infrastructure, etc. That's, I think, the pathway for us must be comply in terms of to see how to have a just and fair transition. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And thank you to all of my panelists who are here today for this panel on overcoming the bottleneck of specialized labor. Tatiana Iosiper from Romania, Dr. Barbara Kaufmann from the EU, Antje Klaus Vorreiter, Eric Manzi, and Roberto Barrios Castillo, the Undersecretary for Mexico. Thank you all so much. A round of applause for our panelists.